Greetings people, 'tis I, 480 volts. The next several video games that I'm going to be talking about will take place on arguably one of the greatest video game consoles of all time, the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo did a lot of things that were revolutionary in the gaming world. The 16-bit barrier was broken. The console experimented with 3D effects. And of course, just the games themselves that were released for this console were just amazing, making the Super Nintendo one of my favorite consoles of all times. And today we are going to talk about probably the first game that anybody ever played on it, Super Mario World. Super Mario World was directed by Takashi Tezuka and produced by Shigeru Miyamoto. The development process was met with some difficulty, being one of the very first games for the new console, and the team having to work with new and unfamiliar software. The game was released for the Super Nintendo on November 21st, 1990 in Japan, August 23rd, 1991 in North America, and April 11th, 1992 in Europe. The game ended up becoming one of the best-selling SNES games of all time, selling over 20 million copies worldwide. The story is that Mario, Luigi, and Princess Toadstool travel to a remote island for a nice, relaxing vacation. Somewhere along the line, the princess does what she does best, gets captured, and Mario and Lou set out to find her. During their travels, they encounter a baby dinosaur just hatched named Yoshi, who informs them that his friends and family, not yet hatched, have been kidnapped by Bowser and the Koopaling children, leading Mario and Lou to believe that Bowser is also behind the princess's disappearance. The Mario Bros and their new dino friends set out to stop Bowser again. They travel through the various worlds of Dinosaur Island, trash the Koopalings one by one, each time rescuing a dinosaur egg, and finally face off against the Koopa King and rescue the princess. Again, after which they decide to go on vacation. Again, as usual, the story isn't particularly important. Let's just move on to the gameplay. So the basic foundation for Super Mario Bros. Was laid out in the very first game, the second game drifted into a weird sort of detour, and the third game returned to that basic foundation and built upon it greatly. For this title, Nintendo continued with the basic foundation and built even more upon much of what was already done in Mario 3. Many elements from Mario 3 remain, such as the world map system and the Koopaling battles. The worlds have unique names this time instead of numbers, with Yoshi's Island, Donut Plains, Vanilla Dome, the Forest of Illusion, Chocolate Island, and the Valley of Bowser. The worlds definitely overlap a lot more than they did in Mario 3, and there are tons of shortcuts you can use to skip to different worlds, the most notable being the Star Road, which can be accessed as early as Donut Plains and can take you straight to the final area, almost to the doorstep of Bowser's castle. While the stages are completely linear and have the official end of stage point, many stages have secret detours and exits you can use to take shortcuts. The world is just a lot bigger this time around. As for the stages themselves, they're the standard Mario platforming playgrounds you've come to expect from the franchise. We've got pipes to crawl down in, water to swim around in, auto-scrolling stages to traverse, the works. Many of the enemies from Mario 3 return here, like the Koopas, Bullet Bills, Lakitus, Thwomps, Boos, Dry Bones, etc. Returning from Mario 2 along with the Bob-ombs are Pokies, which are now yellow. Strangely enough, there are no Goombas this time around, and that didn't hit me until I had finished the game and I suddenly thought about it. There are also enough new enemies to pick on. I'd just like to note that you can totally hijack the Lakitu's cloud and ride in it and become the Lakitu yourself. Mario controls just like he did before, still able to pick up objects and throw them, although now he can also throw objects straight up. He can also pick up a lot more objects than before. Mario has a new move this time around, the spin jump, which is a little more powerful than the normal jump. Even though there is no visible P-meter like in Mario 3, if you run long enough, Mario will still jump a little higher than normal. As for power-ups, we've got the standard Super Mushrooms, Stars, 1-Up Mushrooms, and Fire Flowers, which work just like they did before, and our new power-up this time is the Cape, which pretty much works just like the Raccoon Tail in Mario 3, only now when you use it to fly, you can have Mario dive straight to the ground. The Cape also gives you a spin attack like the tail, which is a whole lot more reliable than the tail. There is a box at the top of the screen, and when you pick up an extra power-up, it will be placed in the box. Then when you take damage and lose your power-up, the one from the box will drop down and you can grab it. Probably the biggest innovation in this game is Yoshi, whom you hatch from dinosaur eggs in various stages. Jumping on Yoshi allows the player to ride him throughout the stage. He basically controls like Mario. He can walk, run, and jump. Yoshi's jump carries more power than a normal Mario jump, and Yoshi can bounce off spiked enemies or piranha plants that would normally hurt Mario. Yoshi also sports a tongue attack which can swallow enemies. Yoshi digests most everything he eats, however he can hold Koopa shells in his mouth for a limited period of time, and in the case of green Koopas, spit the shells back out. In the case of red Koopas, breathe fire, and holding a blue Koopa shell gives Yoshi a set of wings, allowing him the the fly. Mario can dismount Yoshi at any time by pressing the A button. Yoshi will wait there for you unless you travel too far off screen, causing him to just disappear. If Yoshi is hit by enemies or hazards while you're riding him, you will fall off and Yoshi will run away. If you're fast enough, you can remount Yoshi. If there is a cliff in Yoshi's path during this time, however, he will not stop for it, and if he runs off the edge like a lemming, you lose your Yoshi until you find another one. Yoshi does carry over through stages, so if you keep him to the end of one stage, you can start the next one with him. Yoshi will never enter a castle stage, however. I guess he's too scared, and Mario will dismount him before entering. The main Yoshi is green, however, you can find other colored Yoshis in the Star Road stages, each with different levels of tricks while holding Koopa shells in their mouths. The last new innovation are the colored switches. In many of the different stages, you'll notice outlines of colored blocks, red, green, yellow, or blue. In hidden areas of the different worlds are bonus stages that end with a giant colored switch, jumping on which solidifies all of the blocks of that color. For example, if you jump on the red switch, all of the red outline blocks will become solid for the rest of the game. Some of these blocks are positioned to form bridges over bottomless pits. Mario's controls feel about the same as Mario 3, maybe just a little bit better. Probably the one thing that stands out to me the most about this game is the level design. First off, these stages are quite a bit bigger than in previous titles. None of them take terribly long to beat, but they're just bigger, wider, and filled with more stuff. There's plenty of places to explore and lots of little secrets cleverly tucked away. Honestly, that time limit is probably my biggest enemy, as I'd want to stay in these stages as long as possible and go everywhere and touch everything, and then I'd hear the hurry up times running out sound. And of course, the platforming is just glorious. The stages are so perfectly constructed and polished. Don't get me wrong, if it's your first time playing through, you're most likely going to have a tough time until you're familiar with the layouts, but nothing really happens that I would consider the game's fault. Basically, anytime I screwed up, I'd think, well, that was a boneheaded move on my part, and I see what I really should have done. Actually, I did screw up quite a bit playing this game, and I had a hard time, but that just means I suck. Even the auto-scrolling stages, while difficult and challenging, are by no means unfair. Like the previous titles, this game is just platforming. Nothing more, nothing less. The graphics aren't the most impressive thing for jumping into 16-bit, at least not for me anyway. The backgrounds do have more detail and the textures are much more polished, but beyond that, it's nothing too special. A lot of that is probably due to Mario games sporting a naturally cartoony look, which is perfectly fine. Maybe the graphics were really impressive back in the day of its release, but I played games like Donkey Kong Country, so I know what the SNES was capable of doing graphically. Still though, everything just has a little bit more life in it than the NES, so yeah. I also do really like the different animations of Mario destroying castles after each Koopaling battle. The music was once again composed by Koji Kondo. First, let's talk about the composition. In the previous titles, there were about 6 or so different themes that were reused throughout the whole game, each belonging to different stage types, like a specific underground theme, an underwater theme, a castle theme, etc. This game continues that trend, but goes even a bit further. There is one specific central theme throughout this game, and the different level tracks are just different arrangements of that one theme. For example, the main theme is heard in the normal stages, a more bouncy and upbeat version is heard in the more intense platforming stages, a slower 6x8 time signature version is heard underwater, a minor key version is heard in the castles, and so on and so forth. I actually really like this idea musically. Also, while you're riding Yoshi, a percussion track is added to the music which discontinues the moment you dismount. Nice little touch. It's also interesting to hear a Mario soundtrack in which the main theme isn't in the key of C. In fact, the majority of this game's soundtrack is in the key of F. Now let's talk about the production. The music has greatly benefited from the jump into 16-bit. It definitely hasn't aged too well. It sounds like everything was recorded on a really cheap synthesizer with no effects, and everything just kind of sounds dry. But it's still a huge improvement over the blips and bleeps of the 8-bit days, although the last few NES games were really starting to get good with their music. It's still nice to be able to hear something that resembles steel drums and strings and such. Not to mention the sound effects like jumping, collecting coins, and earning 1-ups are a little less ear-grating this time around. All in all, the music is quite good both compositionally and productionally. This game is very near and dear to the hearts of Mario fans. Many people consider it to be the greatest Mario franchise, or at least the 2D Mario games, and definitely one of the greatest 2D platformers of all times. Of course, I prefer any Sonic or Mega Man game to this, but I will say that this is probably the best 2D Mario game I've ever played. It's solid, it's polished, and it was a wonderful game to kick off the 16-bit era of video games. Well, that was Super Mario World, everybody. Wonderful game. I hope you enjoyed the review. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, do all the usual stuff, and I will see you in the next video. Later!